Please, I'm begging you. Don't do this. I'll do anything. The courtroom froze at the desperate words. Marcus Bennett, who had spent 5 years of marriage believing his wife was barren, had walked in expecting a simple divorce. He thought he had won. 5 years, no children, no hope, and finally freedom. But as the heavy wooden doors opened, his ex-wife Leah walked in with calm steps. She was heavily pregnant, her hand resting protectively on her belly. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. The world he had built on arrogance shattered in a single instant. Whispers filled the air, people shifting in their seats as the scene unfolded. Marcus had called her barren, worthless, incapable of giving him an heir. Now, on the very day he hoped to sever their bond forever, she appeared carrying the one thing he had long demanded: life. Before we reach this moment, let's go back. Marcus Bennett and Leah once seemed like the perfect couple. Their modern townhouse in Chicago shone with polished glass windows and sleek furniture. Both worked demanding jobs. Marcus in finance, Leah in marketing. They were admired by friends, envied by colleagues, and appeared untouchable. Yet beneath the glossy surface, one thing was missing: children. Year after year passed in silence. No laughter, no tiny footsteps. Only the unspoken ache that grew heavier with each month. At first, Marcus reassured her with soft words. "It will happen when the time is right, Leah. Don't worry." She clung to that promise, going through endless tests, painful appointments, and sleepless nights filled with hope. But every negative result chipped away at her spirit, leaving her feeling smaller, while Marcus's patience thinned into anger. Leah endured not only her own disappointment but also the cruelty of Marcus's family. Sunday dinners turned into interrogations. His mother sighed loudly, muttering, "A family isn't complete without children." His sisters giggled behind her back, whispering that Marcus had chosen the wrong woman. At first, Marcus defended her, brushing away their insults. But over time, their words became his own weapon. Frustration brewed into venom. Arguments broke out over the smallest things: a burnt dinner, a misplaced paper. They always circled back to the same accusation. 5 years, Leah. 5 years of nothing. What good are you to me if you can't even give me a child? Leah tried everything: adoption, counseling, treatments. But Marcus refused. To him, her worth was measured by children, by heirs, by the continuation of his name. And because she could not give him that, he began to see her as a failure. Their home turned into a battlefield of resentment. The bed grew cold, the nights silent, the love they once shared now buried under bitterness. Marcus stayed out late, returning with the smell of alcohol, or worse, the faint trace of perfume that wasn't hers. Confrontations became storms. One night, in a rage, he spat cruelly. "Maybe if you were a real woman, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere." Leah's tears flowed, but Marcus's anger was unstoppable. Then came the night that ended everything. It was a stormy October evening, thunder crashing as rain lashed the windows. Leah pleaded through her sobs. "Marcus, please don't do this. Don't throw us away." But Marcus slammed his fist on the counter. "I've wasted enough time. Pack your things. Leave. You're barren, Leah. I can't waste another day with you." With her heart breaking, she gathered her belongings and stepped into the storm. The rain soaked her hair and clothes as she dragged her small suitcase through the street. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains but offered no help. The door slammed behind her like the sound of final judgment. Each step forward was heavy, but something inside her stirred. Marcus had cast her out, labeling her defective. Yet in the ache of rejection, she discovered a small spark: determination. Leah whispered to herself through trembling lips, "This isn't the end." She rented a modest apartment downtown. Its walls were bare, the floors worn, but it was hers. She painted one wall green, strung lights across the ceiling, and bought a small bookshelf. Every choice she made was her declaration. She was starting over. Nights were lonely, meals were for one, and silence pressed hard against her. But slowly, the quiet turned into clarity. She had been broken but not destroyed. One evening, while walking by the river to clear her head, Leah noticed a man unloading boxes at a small community center. His broad shoulders bent easily under the weight, yet his movements were gentle, unhurried. She paused for a moment watching. When their eyes met, he gave her a warm smile. "Cold evening, isn't it?" he said. She nodded, surprised at how natural the exchange felt. His name was David Monroe, a volunteer who spent evenings helping set up food drives and tutoring kids. Their conversation was brief, just a few words about the weather, but something about his kindness stayed with her. For the first time in months, Leah went home with a lighter heart, replaying his smile in her mind. She didn't know why, but she hoped she might see him again. Fate seemed determined to bring them together. Leah began noticing David everywhere. In the coffee shop she frequented, at the farmer's market on Saturday mornings, even during her evening walks. Each encounter grew into longer conversations. They talked about books, music, and the city they both loved. With David, there were no judgments, no pointed questions, only listening. Leah found herself opening up about things she had buried. The shame of her failed marriage, the cruel words Marcus had hurled, the loneliness that sometimes pressed like a weight on her chest. David never flinched. He never told her she was broken. Instead, he said gently one evening, "Leah, you were never the problem. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." His words sank deep into her soul, patching wounds that had long refused to heal. As the weeks turned into months, their friendship blossomed into something stronger. David's presence was steady like an anchor. He never pushed her but allowed love to grow at its own pace. They laughed over silly jokes, shared quiet walks, and built moments that felt like small sanctuaries. Leah noticed herself changing. She was lighter, more confident, even daring to hope again. One morning, as sunlight streamed through her curtains, she felt something unusual, a wave of nausea. At first, she dismissed it, blaming stress. But when the days passed and her cycle failed to arrive, she took a test. The sight of 2 pink lines nearly knocked the breath out of her. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she sat on the bathroom floor, laughing and crying all at once. "It can't be real," she whispered. But it was. David found her still on the bathroom floor, clutching the test in trembling hands. Without asking questions, he knelt, lifted her gently, and pressed his forehead to hers. "We're going to be okay," he whispered. "This is your life, our life, and it's just beginning." Leah sobbed against his chest, overwhelmed by the miracle she never thought she'd see. Each flutter in her stomach became proof that Marcus had been wrong. For 5 years she was called Barren. Now life grew within her, stronger each day. David stood beside her at every doctor's appointment, helped assemble the crib, and read to her belly at night. Leah would lie awake sometimes, smiling as she heard him whisper stories and promises to the child. Every day with David healed the wounds Marcus had carved, replacing despair with quiet triumph. Leah began to glow in ways she never imagined. The heaviness she once carried was gone, replaced by a confidence that radiated in her laughter, in her walk, in the way she touched her belly with pride. She had been discarded, yes, but not destroyed. Instead, she was reborn. Meanwhile, Marcus remained oblivious. He had filed for divorce months earlier, assuming Leah would never fight back. In his mind, the process was a mere formality, just paperwork to seal her shame. He walked into the courthouse one bright March morning, dressed in his navy suit, certain of victory. What he didn't know was that Leah would walk in that same room, carrying more than just dignity. She carried proof that his cruelest words had been lies. And when their eyes met across the courtroom, Marcus's world would collapse. Marcus entered the courthouse that morning with a sense of smug confidence. He adjusted his cufflinks, smoothed the lapel of his tailored suit, and strode toward the clerk's desk as if he owned the room. His lawyer followed closely, murmuring reminders about the case, but Marcus barely listened. To him this was already over. "She won't show up," he muttered under his breath. "Too ashamed. Too weak." He pictured himself walking out, free at last, with no ties to a woman who had failed him. In his mind, Leah was still broken, barren, and humiliated. He expected silence, compliance, and a swift signature from the judge. What Marcus did not expect was that the very woman he had cast aside would appear with a strength that silenced the entire courtroom. The judge entered, his robes brushing the floor as he took his seat. "We will hear the case of Bennett versus Bennett. Is the petitioner ready to proceed?" Marcus straightened his posture, giving a confident nod. His lawyer placed the papers in front of him, each page a reminder of the victory he thought certain. The gallery was quiet, the air heavy with anticipation. Marcus leaned back slightly, a smirk tugging at his lips. He had convinced himself Leah would never dare face him again. But then the wooden doors creaked open at the back of the courtroom. A hush fell instantly. Heads turned. The rhythm of footsteps echoed on the tiled floor. Marcus glanced up casually, only to freeze when his eyes met Leah's. She walked in slowly, her back straight, her head high. A long, flowing coat draped over her shoulders, but it could not conceal the roundness of her belly. Leah was visibly pregnant, radiant, and unshaken. Gasps rippled across the room. The clerk's pen stopped midair, the reporter paused, even the spectators leaned forward. Marcus's hands trembled, the pen he held rolling off the table unnoticed. His heart pounded in his chest as whispers filled the room. "Is that her? She's pregnant." Every sound blurred together as his world tilted. For 5 years he had called her barren. For 5 years he had mocked her. And now, in front of everyone, she carried undeniable proof that he had been wrong. Marcus's lawyer leaned in urgently. "Sir, stay composed. This is still about the divorce." But Marcus barely heard him. His eyes were locked on Leah. Questions slammed into his mind, each one louder than the last. Could the child be his? Was this the result of their final attempts before she left? Or was it another man's child, a gift he could never give her? The uncertainty gnawed at him, leaving him shaken. Leah moved forward with deliberate grace, her hand resting protectively on her belly. She did not glance away. Every step seemed to declare, she was no longer broken, no longer his to control. The judge tapped his gavel. "Order in the court." Leah took her seat calmly, her posture firm, her gaze steady. Marcus tried to steady his breathing, but his chest tightened. He remembered every insult, every cruel word he had thrown at her. He recalled his mother's sneers, his sister's laughter, his own voice declaring her useless. And now the evidence of his failure sat directly across from him, unshaken. Leah placed her hand over her stomach and looked straight at him. There was no fear in her eyes, only strength. For Marcus, that look was unbearable. It was as if the roles had reversed. She had power and he had none. The gallery buzzed with whispers, people nudging each other, exchanging stunned glances. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his tie. His lawyer whispered again, "Proceed with the case. Ignore her presence." But how could he? Leah's quiet confidence spoke louder than any words. She didn't need to argue or defend herself. Her very existence in that moment was a victory. Marcus felt the weight of regret pressing down on him. He had imagined today as a triumph, a chance to erase her from his life. Instead, it had become a reckoning, exposing the cruelty he once wore like armor. Finally the judge spoke again. "Mr. Bennett, you may present your case." Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came. The speeches he had rehearsed, the arguments prepared by his lawyer, dissolved into dust. His throat tightened, his hands shook. Across the table, Leah sat in silence, her calm demeanor only amplifying his chaos. "Sir," the judge prompted. Marcus stammered, but nothing coherent formed. His lawyer nudged him harshly. "Say something," he whispered. But Marcus couldn't. He was frozen, trapped by the sight of the woman he had discarded now sitting with undeniable dignity and a child that could change everything. Leah finally raised her eyes and met his directly. The intensity in her gaze pierced him like a blade. For years he had watched her cry, beg and break. Now she was steady, unflinching and victorious. Marcus felt his knees weaken. The gallery murmured again. "Look at him, he's falling apart." His palms grew sweaty, his heart raced. For the first time in years, he was the one shrinking under her stare. He had mocked her pain, but now he was drowning in his own humiliation. Leah didn't need to say a single word. Her presence told the whole story. Suddenly, Marcus lurched forward, his pride crumbling in front of everyone. Ignoring his lawyer's protests, he fell to his knees on the cold courtroom floor. Gasps rippled through the audience. "Leah, please," he whispered at first, then louder, his voice cracking. "Please don't go through with this divorce. That child, it's mine, isn't it? Please come back." His desperation poured out raw and unfiltered. He reached toward her as though he could pull her back into his grasp. The room held its breath. The man who once called her worthless now begged for her forgiveness, trembling like a child before her. Leah remained still, her hands folded over her belly, her expression unreadable. She had dreamed of this moment, imagined what it would feel like to see Marcus brought low. Yet standing here she felt something colder, sharper, clarity. Marcus's voice grew frantic. "I was wrong. Called you Barren, I blamed you. But I see now, I'll change. Please don't take this from me. We can fix it." His words stumbled into sobs, tears streaking down his cheeks. The judge struck his gavel sharply. "Mr. Bennett, you are out of order. Rise immediately." But Marcus did not move. His entire being was fixed on Leah, desperate, broken and powerless. The spectators leaned forward, unable to look away. Whispers floated through the room. "Is that really Marcus Bennett on his knees? Unbelievable." His lawyer tugged at his sleeve, whispering harshly, "Sir, get up. You're humiliating yourself." But Marcus couldn't rise. Pride, the armor he had always worn, had cracked into pieces. Leah's silence was more painful than any insult she could throw at him. He searched her face for a trace of sympathy, some sign that she might still love him. But what he saw was resolve. Her calm expression told him everything. He was too late. Finally Leah spoke. Her voice was soft but carried through the hushed courtroom. "Marcus, this isn't a negotiation. You chose this path when you threw me out, when you called me Barren. You don't get to rewrite it now." Her words struck him like blows. He shook his head violently, tears streaming. "No, you don't understand. I was blind, Leah. See it now. That child, it has to be mine. Please don't do this." Leah's gaze never faltered. "You lost the right to claim me or this child when you abandoned me. This is not your redemption." The judge tapped his gavel, struggling to restore order. "Mr. Bennett, sit down. This hearing will proceed under the law, not personal pleas." But Marcus barely heard. His eyes stayed locked on Leah, his hands trembling. "I can change," he cried, his voice breaking. "I'll be better. I'll be the man you wanted me to be. Just give me one more chance." The gallery shifted uncomfortably, the murmurs now tinged with pity. Some shook their heads, whispering that Marcus was only sorry because she was no longer under his control. Others watched Leah, their eyes full of admiration for her strength. Leah kept her composure, her hand resting gently on her belly. For 5 years she had been silenced, her worth reduced to nothing by the man kneeling before her. Now she held power without even raising her voice. She inhaled slowly and said, "This isn't about second chances. This is about me reclaiming the life you tried to take from me." Marcus's body sagged at her words. His sobs echoed against the courtroom walls, sharp reminders of how far he had fallen. Leah's eyes softened, but only slightly. She didn't hate him, she had simply outgrown him. The judge, now visibly irritated, raised his voice. "Mr. Bennett, control yourself. If you cannot conduct yourself properly, I will have you removed. The bailiff stepped forward, but Marcus lifted his hands in surrender. He staggered to his feet, his suit crumpled, his face streaked with tears. He tried to straighten his tie, but the gesture looked pitiful rather than composed. Leah watched quietly, unmoved by his attempt to regain dignity. She had lived through years of his pride and cruelty. Now the image of him broken held no triumph for her, only finality. Marcus's lawyer leaned close, whispering urgently, "Say nothing more. Let me handle this." But Marcus shook his head. "No," he muttered hoarsely. "This is between us." He turned back to Leah, his eyes pleading. "You're carrying my child. You can't shut me out." Leah tilted her head slightly, her lips pressing into a thin line. "This child is mine," she said firmly. "I don't owe you anything. Not my forgiveness, not my love, and certainly not this child's future." The words reverberated through the room like thunder. Marcus stumbled back as though struck. The gallery erupted into soft gasps and whispers. "She said it's hers alone. Did you see his face?" Marcus's chest tightened, his breath coming in short, uneven bursts. He had imagined this courtroom as the place where he would finally sever ties, walking away victorious. Instead, it had become the stage of his public defeat. His reputation, his pride, even his carefully crafted image, all crumbled before the eyes of strangers. Leah's poise, her calm defiance, only magnified his downfall. He wanted to rage, to shout, but his strength was gone. The judge struck his gavel again. "We will proceed. The petitioner has filed for divorce. The respondent is present. The court will hear her side." Leah nodded politely and began to speak, her voice steady and clear. She described the years of insults, the pressure, the humiliation she endured at Marcus's hands. She did not exaggerate or lash out. She simply told the truth, and the truth was enough. Every word pierced Marcus deeper than any accusation. He shifted in his chair, unable to look at her, the weight of his actions finally bearing down on him. When Leah finished, silence filled the room. The judge nodded slowly, his face thoughtful. "This court recognizes the testimony of Mrs. Bennett. Given the circumstances, this divorce will proceed with due consideration for her well-being and the child she carries." Marcus flinched at the mention of the child. His lawyer scribbled notes furiously, but Marcus barely noticed. His focus remained on Leah, the woman who had once been his and now stood completely out of reach. He wanted to shout that he still loved her, but deep down he knew the truth. He loved only the idea of control, not her. Leah lowered her gaze briefly, then looked up again, her eyes shining with unshed tears, not of sorrow but of release. For the first time in years she felt free. The weight Marcus had forced upon her was gone. The child she carried was not a chain to the past but a promise of the future. Marcus watched helplessly as she radiated strength he had never recognized before. His lips trembled as he whispered under his breath, "What have I done?" But no one answered. The courtroom had already spoken. Leah had won, not through revenge or anger, but through survival. The judge cleared his throat and continued with the formalities of the case, but the tension in the room lingered like a heavy cloud. Marcus sat slumped in his chair, his once polished image shattered. He stole glances at Leah, hoping for a flicker of compassion. But Leah remained steady, her eyes forward, her hand resting protectively on her belly. She didn't need to speak again. Her silence carried the weight of justice. Each moment that passed drove Marcus deeper into the realization that he had lost, not just a wife, but a future he had been too blind to see. The judge finally delivered the ruling. The marriage between Marcus Bennett and Leah Bennett is hereby dissolved. Custody and rights regarding the child will be determined in future hearings, but for now, the respondent's welfare and that of her unborn child are paramount. The gavel struck the desk with a resounding crack. Leah exhaled, relief washing over her like a tide. Marcus's chest heaved as if the sound had struck him physically. He lowered his head, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The courtroom, filled with whispers and side glances, had witnessed the collapse of a man once consumed by pride. As people began to rise and shuffle toward the doors, Marcus remained frozen. His lawyer muttered something about appeals and paperwork, but the words slid past him like water. He could only watch Leah as she stood gracefully, her coat falling around her frame, her rounded belly prominent. She turned briefly, meeting his gaze one last time. There was no anger, no bitterness, only a calm detachment that pierced him more deeply than hatred ever could. It was the look of someone who had survived him and no longer needed his acknowledgement. "Leah, please," Marcus whispered hoarsely, his voice breaking as the crowd thinned. "Don't leave me like this." But she didn't answer. She simply turned away and walked toward the exit, each step echoing with quiet finality. The bailiff held the door open for her, and with one last stride, she disappeared from the courtroom. The sound of the door closing rang in Marcus's ears like thunder. His hands clenched into fists, his chest heavy with regret. The woman he had belittled and broken had risen beyond his reach outside the courthouse. Leah inhaled deeply, the cool air filling her lungs. The weight of the past 5 years seemed to lift with every breath. She touched her belly gently, a soft smile curving her lips. The child within her was not a reminder of pain but a symbol of renewal. She thought of David, the man who had shown her kindness and love without conditions. His steady presence had given her the courage to stand tall today. She knew her journey was far from over, but for the first time in years she felt certain of her future. Back inside, Marcus sat in silence long after the courtroom emptied. His lawyer tried to pull him to his feet, but he resisted. His mind spun with memories of Leah, her laughter when they first met, the nights she waited for him to come home, the tears she shed when he called her Barren. He had crushed her spirit, only to realize too late that she was stronger than he ever imagined. "She'll come back," he muttered to himself weakly. But the hollow sound of his voice told him otherwise. Leah had left, and she would not return. Days later, Marcus wandered his empty townhouse. The walls, once filled with Leah's touches, now felt sterile and cold. He poured himself a drink but left it untouched, staring at the glass as though it held answers. At night, he tossed in bed, haunted by the image of Leah walking into court radiant and pregnant. He wondered constantly, was the child his? The uncertainty gnawed at him, driving him toward madness. He longed to claim it, but deep down he knew he had no right. He had forfeited every chance when he cast Leah aside. Leah, meanwhile, embraced her new life. David stood beside her as they prepared for the baby, their evenings filled with laughter and gentle plans. She decorated a small nursery with soft colors and hand-sewn blankets. Each brushstroke, each carefully placed item, reminded her that she had built this new chapter on her own strength. David's love was a blessing, but her true victory was rediscovering her worth. The child growing inside her was not proof for anyone else. It was a gift to herself, proof that she was never broken. One evening, as she rocked in a chair by the window, Leah whispered to her unborn child, "You saved me without even knowing it. You gave me back my life." The city lights shimmered outside, a reflection of her newfound peace. She no longer carried the weight of Marcus's words. They had lost their power. What remained was resilience, a strength that pulsed through her with every heartbeat. The past would always exist, but it no longer defined her. She had risen, and nothing could take that away. Marcus never recovered from that day in court. His pride, once his fortress, had become his prison. The memory of Leah's calm strength haunted him endlessly. Meanwhile, Leah stepped into her new life with courage. She was no longer the broken woman cast into the rain. She was a mother, a survivor, and a woman who had reclaimed her voice. Her story was not one of defeat but of rebirth. And though Marcus's world had crumbled, Leah's had just begun, bright, steady, and filled with the promise of tomorrow.